Welcome to the Top 10 at 10. Today is June the 12th, 2014. I'm your host, Dan Wright, writer@OurHD.tv, and these are the top 10 stories. Load. Okay. Story number 10 is from Talking Points Memo. 5 major cases the Supreme Court will decide this month. The Supreme Court has already delivered major rulings this year on campaign finance, prayer, and public meetings. But by the end of June, the court is expected to hand down several more important decisions that could dramatically alter the law and affect Americans' lives. The contraception mandate, recess appointments, how we watch TV, which I guess is about TV shows. The broadcast say areas. Okay, it's about copyright, how they were on to broadcast. Cell phone searches. That's got to be a huge one. And buffer zones at abortion clinics. So this could be a pretty eventful. Searching for cell phones seems to be one of the bigger ones. Contraception mandate too. So it's big session coming up here. Story number 9. That's from AP. Biden, U.S. supports Ukraine-Russia force talks. Vice President Joe Biden says the United States strongly supports negotiations among Ukraine, Russia, and international diplomats to resolve the crisis in Ukraine. The White House says Biden spoke by phone Wednesday with Ukraine's new president, Petro Poroshenko. It was their second conversation in 2 days. The White House says Poroshenko told Biden he's still committed to his offer to grant amnesty to insurgents who lay down their arms or allow them to return to Russia. Biden told Poroshenko the U.S. applauds the peace plan he presented Saturday. Yeah, no kidding. Probably helped write it. Story number 8. The extraordinary promise of saltwater agriculture. This is getting around, so I guess I just give a little read here. Fresh water is terribly scarce, less than 3% of the Earth's water, and yet we are wholly reliant on it. But fear not, or perhaps fear less, though salt and plant life don't usually make a great pair. There's a variety of plants salt water doesn't kill. They're called halophytes, and they could be a game changer. Mark Anderson writes of many of these saltwater plants for Eon. The absorbency of the inner stem makes it attractive for animal bedding, while the outer bark has been developed into a thread for cloth. The seed, as noted, is promising the stock for ethanol and biodiesel. We'll refrain from predicting just what you can expect to fill up your tank with halophyte-sourced biofuel. But this is the idea with plenty of potential. More than that, it's an example of what we humans do best, to innovate and adapt. Malthusians too often look at graphs of population growth and resource consumption and conclude that humanity is doomed, but those doomsayers conveniently forget that the pace of technological progress is at the very least keeping up with our growing resource demand. This is interesting because this is the sort of Pollyannish conservative view, and for them, the wars and the famines. That's just what's called price of doing business. So just keep growing population infinitely. What could go wrong? Story number 7 from the Atlantic. The case for reparations echoes in a PA city. This is from Next City. Yeah, it's about the Atlantic piece. In the Atlantic's recent article, The Case for Reparations, Ta-Nehisi Coates takes readers to Chicago to tell the story of systemic robbery and segregation of Black Americans about the 20th and 21st centuries, long after slavery and far outside Jim Crow South. Coates' story echoes in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, just to the west of Philadelphia, in its only city, Chester, just 20 miles down the river from its larger urban neighbor. Chester's population is almost 75% African American, and the poverty rate is almost 32%. The unemployment rate is over 17%. Most of the jobs left in city limits are not held by city residents, including those in the Harrah's Casino and the PPL Park Soccer Stadium. Chester's population is trapped, abandoned by the political and economic systems. Chester wasn't always like this. In the latter half of the 1800s, the city became an industrial town with an emphasis on textiles. In 1901, the wealthy Pugh family bought dozens of acres of land along Delaware River in Chester and its adjoining towns and built Sun Oil Refinery and Marcus Hook and Son shipyards in Chester, Ford Motor Company, Baldwin Locomotive, and Scott Paper opened factories too. As a result of the plentiful jobs and relatively cheap housing, Chester proved a magnet for African Americans migrating northward to escape Jim Crow. In contrast to many of the region's other cities, Chester was a workers' town, making money for factory owners and all other wealthy businessmen who lived elsewhere. Okay, so then the crash happened, and here we go. I mean, read the full article over at Next City. Yeah, there's a lot of what happened. What was described by the Atlantic is a pretty common story in a lot of after the Great Migration, or whatever, when African Americans moved north, which was a good deal until free trade and these other policies that hollowed out the industrial base. Story number 6 from Jacobin magazine. When writers attack bad PR, the unspoken heart of their criticism is the failure on the part of the publicist to adequately conceal that she is performing emotional work for money. Jennifer Pan, Pink Collar. Modern public relations has, in its own parlance, an image problem. As an investigation co-published by the Columbian Journalism Review and ProPublica put it, the industry was literally birthed from a train wreck. In 1906, ex-reporter Ivy Lee preempted media investigations into an Atlantic City train accident by issuing a statement about the accident to reporters. On behalf of the Pennsylvania Railroad, the New York Times printed verbatim what would later be regarded as the first press release. Since then, public relations, often broadly referred to as communications, as a practice has expanded to comprise almost 60,000 workers and intersects nearly every other industry. Although the addition of technology such as social media and mass email distribution have added new layers of specialized labor to the sector, the fundamental premise of PR has remained relatively unaltered since its conception. Hired to promote products and people, publicists exist to solicit positive media coverage for their clients. Now outnumbering journalists 4-1, publicists are an omnipresent component of the machinery that powers creative industries like fashion, arts, and publishing, and increasingly also play central roles in social justice movements, though organizations such as Free Press and writers like Robert McKenzie have led the charge in asserting that the proliferation of these spin doctors constitutes an insidious and growing threat to journalism and democracy. Few have bothered to analyze the gendered split between journalists and publicists, in stark contrast to newsrooms in which women have never exceeded 38%. Public relations operates as a solidly pink-collar sector of the creative industries and comprises a labor force that is currently over 85% female. The palpable distaste for PR practitioners that continues to swell, spearheaded by the very same members of the media with whom publicists theoretically enjoy a symbiotic relationship, requires then a deeper look at how gendered assumptions about work continue to shape our contemporary notions of creative labor under capitalism. So check that out at Jacobin. Story number 5. This is excellent. What is ClickHole? So ClickHole.com is this by the Onion. It's going to, I guess, mock/compete with Buzzfeed. What is ClickHole? ClickHole is the latest, greatest online social experience filled with the most clickable, irresistibly shareable content anywhere on the internet. What is the goal of ClickHole? Let's be honest. Today, the average website carelessly churns out hundreds of pieces of pandering, misleading content, most of which tragically falls short of going viral. At ClickHole, we refuse to stand for this. We strive to make sure that all our content panders to and misleads our readers just enough to make it go viral. You see, we don't think anything on the internet should ever have to settle for mere tens of thousands of page views. We believe that each and every article, whether about pop culture, politics, internet trends, or social justice, should be clicked on and shared by hundreds of millions of internet users before they can even comprehend what they just read. ClickHole has one and only one core belief: all web content deserves to go viral. So this is their little spoof. This is the rest of it. Articles, videos, quizzes, blogs, features. It's very much 16 pictures of Beyonce where she's not sinking into quicksand. Some pics 7 pricks who defy the odds and then go into finance. This video seems silly, but it makes a good point. If I ordered fries, would you have any? Quiz. There's another quiz in here I thought was funny. Quiz, is your dad proud of you? 6 heads you never realized were also on Mount Rushmore. 9 little known holidays you'll never want to miss again. So it's pretty funny. I like this. Especially since Buzzfeed is awful. Story number 4. U.S. recovery looks distant as growth stalls. From the New York Times. Recessions are always painful, but the Great Recession that ran from late 2007 to the middle of 2009 may have inflicted a new kind of pain, an era of slower growth. It's been 5 years since the official end of that severe economic downturn. The nation's total annual output has moved substantially above the pre-recession peak. But economic growth has averaged only about 2% a year, well below its historical average. Households' incomes continue to stagnate, and millions of Americans still can't find jobs. And a growing number of experts see evidence that the economy will never rebound completely. So for more than a century, the pace of growth was reliably resilient, bouncing back after recessions like a car returning to its cruising speed after a roadblock. Even after the prolonged Great Depression in the 1930s, growth eventually returned to the average pace of more than 3% a year. But Treasury Secretary Jacob Lew, citing the Congressional Budget Office, said on Wednesday that the government now expected annual growth to average just 2.1%, about 2/3 of the previous pace. Quote, many today wonder whether something that has always been true in our past will be true in our future, Mr. Lew told members of the Economic Club in New York. Quote, there are questions about whether America can maintain strong rates of growth and doubts about whether the benefits of technology, innovation, and prosperity will be shared broadly. Yeah, no kidding, idiot. By the way, Jack Lew was incredibly corrupt. Offshore bank accounts. As a Citigroup executive who traded on people's faulty mortgages. I mean, he's just talk about someone who should not be Treasury Secretary right now. So yeah, lo and behold, the country riddled with corruption and malevolence and business is having growth trouble, and they were all shocked. Story number 3, San Francisco Gate. In San Francisco, Rick Perry compares homosexuality to alcoholism. Oh, wow, really? He really can't run for president. He's just too dumb. Texas Governor Rick Perry speaking in San Francisco, Freudian slip, speaking in San Francisco on Wednesday night, said the U.S. would better serve its diverse population by letting the states handle many economic and social policies, a point he perhaps inadvertently drove home when he compared homosexuality to alcoholism. Addressing the Commonwealth Club of California, Perry argued the federal government should give up much of its policymaking power, letting states chart their own course on issues ranging from business studies to abortion. He joked about his frequent habit of luring California companies to Texas and called the competition between the two states healthy for both, as well as the nation. But as Perry eyes another possible presidential run, some of his comments illustrated the wide gulf that exists between blue California and red Texas. And within the nation as a whole, the Texas Republican Party this month adopted a platform supporting access to, quote, reparative therapy for gays and lesbians, a widely discredited process intended to change sexual orientation. In response to an audience question about it Wednesday, Perry said he did not know that whether the therapy worked. Commonwealth Club interviewer Greg Dalton then asked him whether he believes homosexuality is a disorder. Well, whether or not you feel compelled to follow a particular lifestyle or not, you have the ability to decide not to do that, Perry said. Quote, I may have had genetic coding that I'm inclined to be an alcoholic, but I have the desire not to do that, and I look at homosexuality the same way. Oh my God. Okay. Please don't run for president. Not that you give a shit. Story number 2. Speaking of ridiculous divides, political polarization in the American public, from Pew Research, how increasing ideological uniformity and partisan antipathy affects politics, compromise, and everyday life. Republicans and Democrats are more divided along ideological lines and partisan antipathy and deeper and more extensive than at any point in the last 2 decades. These trends manifest themselves in myriad ways, both in politics and in everyday life. And a new survey of 10,000 adults nationwide finds that these divisions are greatest among those who are the most engaged and active in the political process. That doesn't surprise me. The overall share of Americans who express consistently conservative or consistently liberal opinions has doubled over the past 2 decades, from 10% to 21%. And ideological thinking is now much more closely aligned with partisanship than in the past. As a result, ideological overlap between the two parties has diminished. Today, 92% of Republicans are to the right of the median Democrat, and 94% of Democrats are to the left of the median Republican. Partisan animosity has increased substantially over the same period, and each party, the share with a highly negative view of the opposing party, has more than doubled. So, it's an extremely polarized country. I don't know if that's good or bad. It seems like it's bad because you can't agree on anything, but at least people know where they stand. I don't know. But in any case, it's at record levels. Story number one, Iraq Prime Minister requesting U.S. airstrikes against militants. This is about with the Islamic State in Iraq and Levant, ISIS, taking over Iraq cities in Mosul and Tikrit. Iraqi Prime Minister Nuri Kamal al-Maliki has reportedly been asking for U.S. assistance. ISIS has taken over more and more of Iraq as U.S.-trained Iraqi security forces fall before them, despite outnumbering them. According to a report in the New York Times, Prime Minister Maliki requested the U.S. carry out airstrikes and staging areas for the militants. President Barack Obama is said to have denied the request. The U.S. currently has no status of forces agreement with the Iraqi government, which Maliki led at the time of the negotiations over the agreement. The Iraqis decided they did not want a U.S. presence in the country. While there may be many issues Americans disagree on, it would be hard to find strong support for re-entering Iraq or even just carrying out airstrikes. The American people want nothing to do with it. Though the U.S. is continuing its drone strikes in Yemen and Pakistan, it has so far refused to carry out the practice in Iraq, carry the practice into Iraq. First saying Maliki never made requests himself, and now claiming not to want to be involved. There seems to be some symbolic resistance to re-entering Iraq. With the U.S. initiated fall of former Iraq President Saddam Hussein came a power vacuum that has now been filled by the precise people the Bush administration planned they invaded to avoid taking control. Bitter irony does not even begin to describe this. Oh, Iraq. Can we even begin to apologize enough for that awful war? Guess not. And that is the top 10 of 10. If you have a story you'd like me to feature on the top 10 of 10, please tweet me at DanSWright. And be sure to read the stories, all the stories at firedogwake.com. Thanks for watching. See you later.